Now we're going to hear more about the reason we're here, the launch of CNERJ. And there are two people who convened this gathering that I'm going to introduce. Debbie Douglas, the Executive Director of OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. She's also a member of the federal government's National Settlement and Integration Council, and she co-chairs the City of Toronto's Newcomer Leadership Table. Debbie.
Thank you, Nancy. Are you feeling inspired? Are you feeling inspired? Yes. My people online, are you feeling inspired? It is so good to look out and see so many of you who came here to join us in this significant step forward in Canada's commitment to building an equitable, anti-racist, and inclusive society. I want to lend my voice to the elder who opened us up and to my sister from Costa Rica who welcomed and called in our ancestors so that they can walk with us throughout the next 2.5 years as we build a common agenda for developing an anti-racist, inclusive world. We're starting with Mexico, the US, and Canada, working in partnership. But we know, and for those of us who were blessed to be in Durban in 2001, we know the promise we came home with. This is the continuation of this work. But I'm here to tell you about OCASI. So, 47 years or so ago, a small group of leaders from community-based service organizations came together at the side of the ISAP conference, and we have some of our colleagues here from immigration, so they will remember what ISAP conference was. It was the Immigration Settlement and Adaptation Program, now called the Settlement and Integration Program. And I keep telling myself, well, I think we've made some progress there because now we no longer talk about adaptation. We now talk about issues of integration. And even when our federal government is being progressive, it talks about inclusion. So we are making progress. This group came together to talk about the need to build a common agenda to ensure ongoing government prioritizing and support for the immigration program and the resources to support the programs that lead to successful immigration journeys. They were clear that services were not enough, that it was important that communities in which immigrants had to live, work, pray, and play had to be places of equity and safety, that these places had to be welcoming and had to provide opportunities for new residents to contribute and to share leadership. A year later, in 1978, OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, was born. From its inception, the Council centered public policy advocacy and government relations as its core functions, along with membership services, advocating for progressive immigration policy and for resources to support those employed to work with new immigrants on their settlement journey. Over the decades, we've grown from a few small agencies to 250 organizations across the province of Ontario, from Kenora to Niagara, from Windsor to Ottawa, and of course, the Greater Toronto Area and all points in between. It is so good to see to have my colleagues here from OCASI, OCASI's Associate Executive Director, Etta Woldeab, our colleague, Selena, who just disappeared, and of course, my board member and our Eastern Region, right here from Ottawa, Regional Director, Miriam Mekney, who is the CEO of Catholic Center for Immigrants here in Ottawa. Welcome. Over the years, we have engaged in court challenges seeking to advance equity for various communities, championed the need for employment equity policy that is inclusive, and after many years of pushing to this, I was very pleased to see the federal government signaled its intention to disaggregate Black African descent identity from the umbrella term of what used to be visible minority and now moving to issues of racialization in recognition of the particular experiences that Canadians of African descent have had in this country over the past 400 plus years. We were also pleased, and this is the work of OCASI and Color of Poverty, Color of Change, to see the inclusion, or at least the planned inclusion, of 2S LGBTIQ plus communities in acknowledgement that many workers face discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. For over 2 decades, as we have been calling for a broad and fair and timely immigration regularization program, there are hundreds of thousands of people living and working and contributing to our communities who are undocumented. The vast majority are racialized from the global South. Many are queer, and because of their lack of immigration status, forced to work in the underground economy where they are often exploited. For women and others who may be experiencing intimate partner and other forms of violence, they are often too afraid to reach out for support, too afraid because of the fear, and the very real fear, of deportation. This must change. We, a broad and deep coalition of activists, advocates, labor, faith communities, business, and elected officials, were successful in getting a commitment from the current federal government to have a program put in place this spring, a program of regularization. We are down to the wire in terms of timing, and we strongly, strongly encourage the government to roll out a program before they rise from Parliament in this summer break. And that is why it is so good that our parliamentary secretary is here to bring that message back to Cabinet. In 2007, OCASI, the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, SALCO, the South Asian Legal Clinic, the ACLC, now Black, the Black Legal Action Center, CASA, the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians, Karuna Community Services, and later, the Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice came together as Color of Poverty, Color of Change to work on racial and economic justice. We brought an intersectional analysis to our policy and advocacy work, paying special attention to the intersections of economic class, gender, disability, sexual orientation, and immigration status. We've called on governments to formally signal their commitment to the eradication of racism and intersecting forms of discrimination by putting in place an intersectional anti-racist legislation. We were successful in Ontario in having such anti-racism legislation enacting, and we will continue to call on the federal government to do something similar. We were successful in having the Anti-Racism Secretariat, and you heard the Executive Director, Peter Flegel, speak so eloquently about the work that we must do, the work that has started and the commitment that has been made to carry forward this work. But we need legislation. This initiative, the Network for Equity and Racial Justice, provides us a platform for us to collectively design and advocate for the necessary resources to implement an intersectional anti-racist national agenda here in Canada. It is an opportunity to renew with strengthened commitments the 5-year-old federal anti-racism strategy and to strongly, as I said, advocate for anti-racism legislation, among other priorities that will emerge over the next 2 years. And I think we heard from our colleague from Mexico. You don't know how excited we got when we heard you speak. We heard from our sister from Costa Rica, and we heard from our Canadian government that that is a commitment, and from our U.S. Spokesperson that is a commitment shared by all three governments, and we intend to hold you to that. I look forward to walking with all of you on this journey towards an anti-racist, equitable society. I thank you, and thank you to my colleagues online.